Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. You know, some of you have asked me for a list of who the best conductors out there today are. And I've sort of hesitated because, frankly, there are a lot of very good conductors out there today. And, you know, the ultimate question being, well, are they as great as the conductors of the past, the great names? And my answer to that is, yeah, of course they are. I mean, why shouldn't they be? What's so fabulous about the great names of the past? I mean, they had their expertise and their specialties, and there will always be talented people who can do just as well. That is truly my belief. But finally, I said to myself, Dave, I said, let's just do it. But I want to do it as a participatory exercise. I am going to give you my list of the 10 best conductors alive, and you are going to give me yours. But there are a few parameters. Of course, there are always parameters, aren't there? The list, first of all, my list has 10. Yours doesn't have to. It can be as many as you want, up to 10. You can repeat names that I list if you agree with me. I mean, fine. I'd love to know if you agree with me. Additionally, it must be based on the conductor's work as a recording artist. I do not want to hear that you saw a fabulous concert conducted by so-and-so. I don't care. No one else cares. No one is able to duplicate the experience you had. So we don't want to hear about it. I really don't want to hear about it. I want to know about recordings that we can all share based on your recommendation. And I really do believe it's better to do less than to do more if you don't have a really cogent explanation for your choice, because we want to hear why. You can mention one of those recordings. You can mention a work, something that says, this is what they've done that is typical of what they've done. Not that they did one great recording and everything else sucks, and is somehow special. I just think it's extremely interesting to see what names we'll come up with, because I know that like I said, I only have 10. There are far more than that. And I've done a lot more listening than most people. That's true. So my experience may be broader in some respects, but on the other hand, I may just as easily have missed out whole pockets of music in the repertoire. And that brings up the last point I want to make, which is, why are we doing conductors? Well, the first reason is because we really love orchestral music more than anything else. At least a lot of us classical music folks do. Some people like chamber music. Some people like piano music. Some people like niche repertoire. And of course, opera and voice people are in a totally other universe all of their own. It's a totally different world, and an equally valid one. I'm not decrying it at all. But soloists, by nature, there are just too many of them, and they're wonderful. I mean, if I had to make a list of the 10 best violinists or pianists, you know, it all just comes down sort of to a personal choice, and they're all really terrific and technically capable. And it's very, very hard to differentiate, I think, the different performance attributes of each one as opposed to those of a conductor. Because with a conductor, the conductor doesn't make any noise. The conductor depends on others to make the noise for them. And so a conductor's qualifications, shall we say, and ability is a lot easier to focus on, because it's other people who are doing it. And if those other people do it badly, it's the conductor's fault. And it's pretty clear whose fault it is. And if they do it really well, it may or may not be the conductor's fault. It's a little tricky. But there are certain criteria that you could apply that will tell you whether you're dealing with a really great conductor as opposed to, say, a violinist or a pianist. Because a violinist trucks around the universe with their violin, and they play it marvelously, and it always sounds marvelous. Same thing with the piano. I mean, it's harder sometimes to find the Steinway or the Bosendorfer or whatever Yamaha that they love best of all. But, you know, a piano's a piano. But an orchestra is quite a different beastie. And, you know, when a conductor gets out there in front of a second-rate orchestra and turns in a thrilling, fabulous account of a repertoire standard, which we all know what the great ones are, and they do something that is absolutely comparable in every way, then you know that they've got something, that there's some real ability there. And likewise, when they get in front of a great, great orchestra, one of the great orchestras in the world that knows the music better than they do, they're either going to fail miserably, or it's going to be just a snooze. Or if they can do something special and personal and bend that orchestra to their will to do something that's pretty unique with that great orchestra, then you know that this is a person who really has a certain quality, and you can verify that or confirm it over the years following their work. And that's why I said we must talk about discographies. And I really think sizable discographies as much as possible. For example, I have very, very good feelings about Susanna Malky, who did those 3 Bartók discs on Bis. I think she's fantastic. I think she's the real deal. She hasn't recorded enough yet for me to get quite a fix on where she is. She needs to do more repertoire. We need to know what her strengths and weaknesses are. So when you choose your conductors, think about those things. Just think about them. We're talking about people who have a certain fund of experience and exposure, and we'll take it from there. So with that said, let me start with my list and my explanation for each choice. And none of these are in any particular order. They are not. I'm telling you right now, there is no however choice. It's just the list of 10, and they're all scrambled up. However, I wrote them down. First, Manfred Honeck and the Pittsburgh Symphony mostly. Manfred Honeck has bothered me as of late, as some of you might know, because he's become terribly narcissistic and self-indulgent in some respects, but the talent is there. And his list of recordings on reference recordings has been pretty spectacular. It really is. And I'm thinking in particular of his recent recording of Beethoven's Eroica Symphony, which is absolutely one of the great Eroicas. And that fits my criteria particularly well for a budding or incipient great conductor, or maybe just a great conductor, somebody who can take a repertory standard like that and really make something fresh of it. And he's done it with more than Beethoven's Third. He did the Fifth, he did the Seventh, he did Dvorak's Eighth, which was magnificent. He's done a series of recordings which have been absolutely spectacular, and a few that have been off. But everybody has their off days, and I'm not going to hold that against him unless it continues, unless it keeps going. So Manfred Honeck, without a doubt, is one of the most impressive podium voices out there today. That's number one. Number two, Esa-Pekka Salonen. People kind of forget him because, first of all, he tends to specialize in contemporary music. Second of all, he's a composer himself, whose music I think is quite good, but most people don't listen to it or care about it terribly much. And third, he has taken lots of time off. I mean, he hasn't been in front of the public. And like so many really fine conductors, remember, he had a major label contract. He had a Sony contract, and they put out a Sony box, which is fabulous, of his LA recordings, which is a marvelous, marvelous box of stuff. The evidence of his excellence is right there in that box. But then he jumped to DG, and they did a few things. And then he's taken some time off, and now he's conducting again. And I'm not quite sure what he's doing. You'll probably tell me what he's doing. I don't pay attention unless I see a record come before me. But I think he is an enormously gifted musician. He is like Pierre Boulez, only with more substance. He has the clarity and detail-oriented, somewhat emotionally cool aspect of a contemporary composer / conductor, but he does it so very well. And he has, by and large, stuck to recording music that he feels strongly enough about to do something with. And so there are wonderful, wonderful records, and there's a wide range from the Bernard Herrmann film music disc to some very, very good Mahler, to some excellent Bartók, to some terrific Sibelius, which he hasn't actually, made an issue of, even though he's finished, which I think is a great thing. He's just an enormously gifted musician, and he's as good as anybody out there in what he does. So that's number two. Number three, Herbert Blomstedt, who happily is still a living conductor. And even though his latest stuff, his Brahms cycle, has been kind of snoozy and not his best work, I mean, he's like 175 and, he can do whatever he wants. It doesn't really matter. He is a tremendously gifted musician. He is not a flamboyant musician. He tends to float under the radar. He's not a musician of the grand, crazy gesture. And he's specialized in music of his native Scandinavia. So that means Sibelius and Nielsen. But, he has his little sidelines, like that fabulous Mahler Second Symphony he did, or all of his Strauss Toe poems, which is as fine a Strauss cycle as anybody has ever touched, and no one says a word about it. He is incredibly consistent and reliable. And I think there's something to be said for that. He has done 2 marvelous Beethoven cycles. And everybody says, oh yeah, the Blomstedt, especially with the Staatskapelle Dresden, is really, really great. I mean, and it really, really is. But then everyone says, oh yeah, but then there's so-and-so, who's a somewhat like bigger personality. But I think ultimately with Blomstedt, he's one of those conductors who is so strong in basic musicality, in things like correct tempos and rhythms and logical interrelationships of various parts and conceptions of whole works and all those sort of abstract concepts we talk about. But he's so good at that stuff that his music has withstood the test of time. He's been around long enough to be recognized as one of the great conductors because it just takes that long, I think, to appreciate some of the qualities he brings to his music making, but they are very, very real. So Blomstedt is my number 3. Number 4, Leonard Slatkin. I don't have to spend too much time on Leonard Slatkin because I just did a Leonard Slatkin conductor feature here and on ClassicsToday.com. But Leonard Slatkin is a marvelous, marvelous conductor. And his discography is incredibly distinguished. I mean, the American music is fantastic. Most of the Russian music is fantastic. His Rachmaninoff is better than anybody's. He is another conductor who has strong ideas of what he does best and what he can do and what he wants to record. He hasn't done much Mahler. His Mahler 1 was lousy. His Mahler 2 was fabulous. But that's about where he stopped. He's conducted a lot more of it than that, but he didn't record it. And that's good because he's focused on the things he does incredibly well. His Vaughan Williams was fabulous. It's the reference cycle right now, I think. His Elgar is fabulous. He really has a tremendous gift in the late Romantic repertoire, and he is not a reticent conductor. He is passionate and impulsive and just marvelous. And this is what's really important, his recordings with the St. Louis Symphony, not the Berlin Philharmonic of orchestras, but one of the great ones, are fabulous. And he raised that orchestra to a level that was second to none. And the recordings are the evidence. So we know he is a great conductor. I mean, he did things in St. Louis that anybody, anywhere could be proud of for the rest of their lives, because the recordings are just that good. And I think that, the evidence is there for anybody who cares to hear it. So again, Slatkin, without a doubt. Next, JoAnn Falletta. I think JoAnn Falletta is the sleeper conductor of the universe, frankly. And for a lot of the same reasons that Slatkin was. She undertook a program of recordings for Naxos, mostly, where she does unusual repertoire, but not repertoire that has never been recorded before. She just plays it better. And she does it better in Buffalo, of all places, with the Buffalo Philharmonic. Again, a second tier, third tier orchestra, who knows? But she's done fabulous, fabulous work. And think, she's done probably what is now the reference version of Glière Symphony No. 3, one of the most difficult and excessive and formally defective and colorful and luscious and yummy pieces of, romantic schlag that anybody ever came up with. And it usually defeats everybody. unless you cut the crap out of it, like, Armindy or Stokowski did, then you can get away with it. Just play half. But she does the whole thing, and she does it splendidly. And in Buffalo, she's really, really good. And the proof of it isn't just that she does unusual repertoire better than most people. It's that when she does usual repertoire, such as, for example, the Respighi tone poems, she turns in performances that are just as fine and that withstand comparison with absolutely the best out there. Now, this is not invariably true. Like I said, every conductor has their ups and downs. But my goodness, that is a striking, striking achievement. And I think she deserves enormous credit for the work that she's been doing in Buffalo or has done in Buffalo. And I've seen her live, and I don't talk about live concerts, but the recordings are not fakes. That I will say. She is a gifted musician by any standard, and I think she deserves credit as such. And she's definitely a conductor I would hire in a minute, to do a series or two, because she knows all kinds of wonderful repertoire, and she just conducts well. So that's great. So JoAnn Falletta is 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, number 5, right in the middle. Number 6, we've been talking about him quite a bit recently, Theodore Kuchar. For a lot of the same reasons that Falletta is wonderful. He's done a lot of unusual repertoire. He's done it in Ukraine with the National Orchestra, or the Lviv Symphony Orchestra there, the Lviv Philharmonic. And, they are not the world's greatest orchestras, but under him they play like they are, and they play as though it means something. And his interpretations are invariably fresh and exciting. Who could do a Nielsen cycle with a provincial Czech orchestra and have it be comparable to the best Nielsen cycles out there? It's that good, interpretively speaking. Kuchar is an exciting, exciting conductor. He really knows what he's doing, and he gets these people to play for him. And the recordings are evidence of that. Some people think it's hard to tell with conductors if they're good or not. You can really hear if a conductor is competent or if they aren't competent, or if the orchestra is just going through the motions. Most of the time, you can tell pretty clearly. Now, I say that because I have, decades of experience playing in community orchestras with lousy conductors, and I know all the tricks, or a lot of them. But I just really think that it's much easier to tell when a conductor is phoning it in than it is when a pianist or violinist is, especially in the virtuoso repertoire. But conductors, like I said, they depend on those other people. And based on what those other people do, you can sort of tell what they're doing. It's really interesting. And Kuchar is the real deal. And I just did a video on his Thomas de Hartmann Orchestral Music Volume 1 on Toccata Classics, which is just fantastic. He discovers new stuff. He presents it marvelously. He knows how to pick them. He knows how to make the orchestra play. What more can you ask for? And if he isn't doing his Beethoven and Brahms cycles, all I can say is, thank God. Who needs more of that stuff? Who knows? He might do it fabulously. And if he does, I'll be delighted because it'll be fabulous. But at the moment, he has an enormous discography, and he has done some standard repertoire. For example, his box of all the Prokofiev symphonies on Naxos, which is it's one of the 1 or 2 or 3 great Prokofiev cycles. Isn't it? Isn't it really? I think it is. So there's Kuchar. Next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, number 7. José Serebrier. Serebrier he's an interesting guy. He's been around for like a million years. He really has. He's done so many good recordings of so much interesting music. The Ned Rorem symphonies, his series of Stokowski transcriptions, because he started life, remember, as one of as a Stokowski assistant. He was one of the assistant conductors in Stokowski's recording of the Ives Fourth, and then he made his own excellent recording of the Ives Fourth. And he's also a composer, and a good composer. And he made Janacek's opera suite from the Macropolis case. He's done all kinds of stuff. I really don't know any repertoire he does that he hasn't done well. The Glazunov symphonies, He's done a Dvorak cycle, which is a little slightly less good, but still pretty good, I mean, by any standard. He's a wonderful all-around musician. And for some reason, he hasn't had a fixed career in one spot. I mean, it may be because he's just kind of a pain in the ass personally. And I say this from love, because whenever something new of his comes out, I get an email. He is the most relentlessly self-promoting guy I've ever seen. And I think as a result of that, most people just say, oh, yeah, here we go again. I find myself, spending less time on things that he promotes most fiercely because he has to trust us to recognize his excellence. So I'm telling you, Maestro, we know you're great. Let us discover it. You don't have to tell us every time you do something. It really isn't necessary. But I definitely would put him in my list of the 10 best conductors out there. You can ask him to do anything, and he will do it superbly well. And I think that's pretty special. And if you haven't heard his work, I urge you to go listen to some of it. I've talked about quite a bit of it in these videos because it's marvelous, especially in the neglected repertoire category. And he's a conductor I would actually like to hear do some more standard repertoire, because I think it might be very interesting to hear what he has to say about it. But that's me. Number 8, Andrew Litton. Andrew Litton is now in Bergen, or he was in Bergen. I mean, these people move around so quickly now, I'm never sure. He's done fabulous stuff there, especially on Bizet, those Stravinsky ballets, which were really, really well done. And Litton is another one of those, sort of fresh-faced conductors. Actually, he's a bit older now, but he started out, remember, on Virgin Classics, doing a Rachmaninoff cycle, which was really terrific. Absolutely first rate. And he did quite a bit of stuff for Virgin. He was almost their house conductor. And a lot of it was, his Elgar's Enigma Variations was amazing. And he remade it, and it wasn't quite as good. He's another conductor who I think has gotten to the point where if he's remaking standard rep stuff, he gets a little bit bored. And so he wants to fuss with it and do things, to show how he can stretch and pull and make the orchestra respond to him. But my gosh, he was a fine conductor, and still is. He really is. I remember his Mahler recordings on Delos with the Dallas Symphony. They were as good as Bernstein's. They really were. They were wonderfully well recorded. He was a fantastic conductor in that repertoire. And so I remain extremely impressed and hopeful that Litton will have a chance to latch on to some other series of recordings that will once again reaffirm his status. Because, the record industry right now is such a mess. To find conductors who are making regular recordings for major labels, and so to know where they are, in their artistic journey, they're not being documented the way they were, and so Litton has to find an outlet, I think, and then go back to doing some stuff, because he is one hell of a fine conductor in that late Romantic, often Russian repertoire, a lot of the same stuff that Slatkin does. But he's a tremendous conductor. He really is, and I look forward to everything that he does. So, number 9, Michael Tilson Thomas. Why do we forget Michael Tilson Thomas? Why? Because once RCA dropped him, the San Francisco Symphony Media, their own label, started doing their own recordings. They did a Mahler cycle, they did all kinds of stuff, and a lot of it was terrific. It was really terrific. Michael Tilson Thomas is a fantastic conductor. A fantastic generalist conductor. He really is. He did some amazing stuff for RCA. You remember the Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique and The Rite of Spring. Anything by Stravinsky and Persephone, that was gorgeous. That recording of Persephone. Whoever pays attention to Persephone. But he did a wonderful recording of that. And then the Romeo and Juliet ballet suites by Prokofiev. And then he went and did his Mahler cycle, which had its hits and misses, but the best of it was absolutely tremendous. The fourth was just fabulous. He did that great Mahler seventh with the LSO. He had a huge career on Sony. Partly with the English Chamber Orchestra, but he did a lot of really good stuff before that. Aside from that, with the London Symphony, he did the Tchaikovsky orchestral suites. Boy, I wish those were reissued. He really has had a storied career. All the Ruggles orchestral music. Again in Buffalo. Yay, go Buffalo. So Tilson Thomas deserves an awful lot of credit, and not the least because when he went to San Francisco, he stayed there. He stayed there, and for a good couple of decades, and really established the orchestra as the world-class ensemble that it was actually under Blomstedt. But, he reaffirmed that. He maintained their status. He even enhanced their status. And he embarked on a really interesting recording program, which unfortunately does not have all the exposure it deserves because of the fact that it's the orchestra's house label. And so it's not the international thing that a major label would have at this point. Or maybe they don't even have it anymore the way they used to. But don't forget Michael Tilson Thomas. He's also done, like Leonard Bernstein did, a tremendous amount of visual media, educational films and things like that for classical music, most of which I look at and just go, ugh, I don't like it at all. But he does it, and lots of people love it. So what I think doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that he does it, and these things are available to everybody. And my feeling is, we all have our personal taste, but whatever works, whatever floats your boat, whatever gets the job done is okay by me. And I have a feeling that he has floated many a boat in his day. So that's number 9. And number 10, my last, and certainly not least, Vladimir Jurowski. Vladimir Jurowski is just exciting as hell, and he is one of the few Russian conductors who plays Russian music really well nowadays. Isn't it funny? I mean, they all come out and they all have, we've got, what's his name, Petrenko, who was blowing Prokofiev's fifth, on Lawo with the Oslo Philharmonic. And, these guys all are supposed to do great Tchaikovsky, and they don't. And they just don't, But Jurowski does. He's a fantastic Tchaikovsky cycle. He's got the best modern Manfred symphony out there. He's done some great Mahler. His LPO recordings on the LPO label, they're live performances, and, so they're a little iffy in terms of recording quality and people choking and coughing and dropping dead in the aisles and whatnot. But they are very, very good quite often as not. He's a conductor that I would always go to hear because I think he has ideas, and I don't think he's ever boring, and he makes the London Philharmonic, which is really not one of the more interesting orchestras in the world, he makes them play wonderfully and with commitment and with passion. And that's not easy when you're dealing with English orchestras like that. I mean, it just isn't. I don't want to get into why. I don't know why it is. It just is. So to get them all riled up and ready to just, spew venom all over the place in Russian music, good for him. He's a tremendous conductor and an exciting conductor, and someone I always look forward to hearing. So those are my 10. For the record, once again, let us say Manfred Honeck, Esa-Pekka Salonen, Herbert Blomstedt, Leonard Slatkin, JoAnn Falletta, Theodore Kuchar, José Serebrier, Andrew Litton, Michael Tilson Thomas, and Vladimir Jurowski. I think that's one heck of a list of 10 major artists, don't you? And it makes me feel good about the prospects for classical music. It really does. I mean, there are some wonderful musicians out there, and there are quite a few that I haven't listed or haven't mentioned because it's simply a question of taste. So now it is time for you, my friends, to tell me who your favorite living conductors are. You can do up to 10. And remember the criteria I outlined. They've got to have a discography, and you have to justify your choice. And I don't want to hear about live concerts. I just want to hear about what they did on disc. And like I said, this isn't so hard. I don't think. I mean, I'll give you another example just of how my thinking works, and maybe you can guide yourself by it. Let's take a look at Andres Nelson's. Deutsche Grammophon announced, you may recall, that he was going to be doing a Beethoven cycle in Vienna and a Bruckner cycle in Leipzig and Shostakovich in Boston. Now, Vienna, of course, is known for their Beethoven and their Bruckner for that matter. Leipzig is known for their Bruckner and for their Beethoven. And the Shostakovich, well, Boston is not known for Shostakovich. And that was kind of interesting, didn't you? Because you would think that being paired with those orchestras, he would be doing very interesting Beethoven and Bruckner, but the Shostakovich might be more iffy. And in reality, just the opposite has been the case. The Shostakovich has been excellent by and large because, except for that horrible first symphony he just did, but, the orchestra is a great orchestra. They can play the pants off of the music, but they do it for him with some commitment and some excitement and some freshness. And it's wonderful, whereas the Beethoven was as dull as ditch water and the Bruckner was even worse, which means it's him. It's his fault. You see what I mean? That's a wonderful way to call it because the evidence is there. You can hear it for yourself and you can say, okay, he's got some sort of feeling for Shostakovich and none whatsoever for Beethoven or Bruckner. Because if you can't do it well with Vienna and Leipzig, then why bother, right? Of course, no one can admit that in the Deutsche Grammophon, but the funny thing about it is that people kind of do know. They really do. So choose wisely. Stand by your decision. And I am really looking forward to seeing some of the people I didn't mention and perhaps some of those that I did. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.